Hello. Wanted to go over Act 5, Scene 1 with you. I also wanted to go over the end of Act 4. We didn't really get to talk about that in class. So the main thing I wanted to talk about for this would be Scene 6 and Scene 7, is that we find out that Ophelia, the main thing is that we find out that Ophelia has drowned. And we're supposed to, what they've said is that she was out picking flowers and that her dress was caught in the water and pulled her down to her death. And so the weight of her clothes drowned her. Now, do we know if she did this intentionally? We don't know that at this point. Or if it was, just an accident that she happened to be picking flowers and then ended up drowning and dying. We also find out in Scene 7 that Laertes is planning a duel with Hamlet and that he is going to poison the end of his sword. And then if that doesn't work, there's also a poison drink for Hamlet as well. So the goal is that they are going to kill Hamlet no matter what. That is the plan during Act 5. Hamlet does not know this, obviously. The Queen also does not know this. So that is for us to know and for them to find out. Make sure I'm not forgetting anything else. And basically on page 105, this is the end of Scene 7, the king, Claudius, almost kind of goads Laertes on, if you really love your father, then you'll avenge his death and you'll fight Hamlet. Which again, we talked about how Laertes is a foil for Hamlet, how he brings out contrasting characteristics, because as soon as he hears about his father dying, he immediately wants to kill whoever did it, and he's ready to take action. Whereas Hamlet knows who killed his father, and his father's ghost has asked him to take revenge on that person, and he's waited the whole play and still hasn't done it. And he's had opportunities to do it as well. Okay, so if we get over into Act 5, we see that it starts with two clowns or two gravediggers. And that time, a clown was not the kind of clown that we think of today. A clown would have just been a rustic person. And in this, I like that No Fear Shakespeare calls them gravediggers instead of clowns. So the clowns start off and they're kind of arguing about whether Ophelia drowned herself or if it was just, she just died by accident. They're digging her grave. The second gravedigger, claims that she wouldn't have been given a Christian burial if she wasn't of gentle blood. So she's been given a Christian burial, but it's not as ornate as it would have been if she had just died. So the church is kind of, we'll get to it in a minute. The church thinks that she killed herself, which is why her burial is not as good as it should have been. Okay, so over in the next section, let's see where I can find it. In this section right here, they're kind of talking about who builds stronger, a mason, someone who builds ships, or a carpenter. Talk about their answers, and then Hamlet comes in the next section. Let me find where Hamlet comes in here. If you have your book, I'm on page 111. Hamlet's kind of mad that they aren't taking their jobs more seriously. That, this is kind of where it starts. Doesn't this guy realize what he's doing? He's singing while digging a grave. And, maybe they are trying to make light of a conversation that would have otherwise been hard to have because they're digging a grave. So Horatio just kind of tells him, they've learned to have a sense of humor about it. They're throwing around a skull that they don't really know whose it was, just kind of making fun of the person. And Hamlet makes Hamlet mad because he says, well, this used to be a person and you're just throwing it around. Like, why aren't you, being more serious with it? At this point, Hamlet does not know whose grave they are digging. He doesn't know that they're digging Ophelia's grave. And the clowns don't know, the gravediggers don't know who they're speaking with. So we have a couple of different examples of dramatic irony here that we know things that these characters don't know. And then, let's see where we are here. There's another. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, so then the gravedigger is talking about how Hamlet was sent to England. This is how we know that, the gravedigger doesn't know who Hamlet is, and Hamlet asks him, well, why was he sent to England? And he says, because he was crazy, and he'll recover his sanity there. If he doesn't, it won't matter in England. And then basically just kind of, I think this is Shakespeare poking fun at England, because this is where he would have been writing the play, and said that everyone is mad in England. Okay, this is the part that kind of brings it a little bit more into focus. So they're continuing to dig, and the gravedigger finds a skull. And if you watch the videos that I have linked, it'll Kenneth Branagh kind of elaborates on this scene a little bit. But it talks about how this man, he was Yorick. His name was Yorick, and he was the king's jester. So the jester would have been like someone who is funny and brings humor into the court. And so this is like the famous scene where Hamlet takes the skull and he's like looking at the skull. And he says, I knew Yorick. I knew who he was. And it kind of just makes Hamlet again remember that life is very fleeting, and that, this person that he knew is now just reduced to a skull. And they also talk about this is on the next page. Let me go over here really quick. And it makes Hamlet realize, he gives this speech, that when people die, how their bodies return to dust. And so how Alexander or Caesar, that their bodies have returned to dust, and that they might be used as part of dirt to plug a hole to keep the winter cold away. That these men who, we've seen as these great, great men, when they die, are just returned to dust, which is everyone dies. Everyone is just returned to dust. Okay, so at this point, we have some characters who enter. We have Claudius and Gertrude, and Laertes and a priest, and then some other lords. And so Hamlet sees them, and they know that they have to move away. And he wants to know who are they following? Who are they bringing to this place to be buried? And Laertes begins to talk, and the priest begins to talk, and we find out that it is Ophelia. And they can't, at this point, they can't really give her all of the normal Christian rights that she would have if she killed herself. So the church is under the impression that she did kill herself, which is why she can't have the normal funeral rites, which is why Laertes asks, is there any other rite you can perform? And the priest says no. So Laertes starts to talk, and he calls her his sister, and that's when Hamlet realizes that this is Ophelia that is in the grave. And the queen says here, I hoped that we would be, adorning your wedding bed and not your grave. She had hoped that Hamlet and Laertes would have gotten together. And then Laertes is so overcome with his grief and his anger that he jumps into Ophelia's grave. He says, "Oh, damn 3 times, damn 10 times, the evil man whose wicked deed deprived you of your ingenious mind. Hold off burying her until I've caught her in my arms once more." So he jumps into her grave, he picks her up, not like out of the coffin, but just kind of holds her. And he's just upset. And then Hamlet comes forth, and he says, "What is he whose grief bears such an emphasis, whose phrase of sorrow conjures the wandering stars and makes them stand like wonder wounded hearers? This is I, Hamlet the Dane." And then he also jumps into Ophelia's grave because he can't be outdone by Laertes. They wrestle with each other on top of her grave. Basically like, "You're not going to outdo me with my love for Ophelia." Which makes us wonder, like, did Hamlet actually love her? Because this whole time he's been, acting like he didn't love her, but was it all just a ploy so he'd get to kill his uncle? It's very confusing. But if he actually did love Ophelia, then he didn't treat her well in the play. Okay, and so then they pull them apart from each other. Hamlet says, "I'll fight over this issue till I don't have the strength to blink." He'll just keep fighting, and then Hamlet confesses his love for her. 40,000 brothers could not with all their quantity of love make up my sum. What will thou do for her? So he's saying 40,000 men, like their capacity to love would not measure the love that I have for her. And he just continues kind of upset, talking about his grief for her. And the queen says that this is pure insanity. He'll be like this for a little while, then he'll be as calm and quiet as a dove waiting for her eggs to hatch. So she says that he'll be upset, but then he'll calm down. And then the king asks Horatio to go with Hamlet just to make sure that he's okay. And they exit, and he tells Laertes, "Don't forget what we talked about last night. Be patient in your speech, or be patient with our plan. Sometimes it's good to act impulsively, and it works out because our previous plans have failed. Other times, though, we screw up if we act impulsively." So that is their plan, to wait and make sure they can carry out their plan easily. So that is scene 1, building up some suspense as to what is going to happen in scene 2 of Act 5. If you have not watched these 2 clips on YouTube, it's not the entirety of scene 1, but it's close. So if you wanted to get an idea of what's happening in scene 1, you could watch those 2 clips. If we are out tomorrow, I'm just going to add to this document. That's why that says this. And I'll try to find some clips of scene 2. I've been looking and there's not a whole lot of good clips, but I'll do my best. And then I'll have a discussion video of scene 2 as well. So, I'm going to post a question to classwork to show that you have read, and then, answer that. And then that's all you'll have to do today for my class. Stay warm, and hopefully I will see you later this week. If not, I'll see you next week.